In 2004, Xbox promised us the future. Not a higher resolution future, just a world that would remember you. Peter Molyneux described Fable as this living organism. Knock an acorn off a branch, come back later, find a forest. A hero who scarred, consequences that altered reality. It was an elegant vision. It was also complete bullshit. Fable launched under promises it couldn't sustain. The world was smaller, the story a guided path, the morality system theater. But instead of rejecting it, we embraced it. The question isn't what was cut, it's how a game defined by its impossible promises became a defining RPG. In 2004, dead center of the sixth console generation, fixed hardware, optical disc, loading gates that politely pretended to be doors. Publishers were learning how to spend serious money. Therefore, they were learning how to market serious ambition long before the code was locked. The PlayStation 2 dominated the install base, the GameCube leaned on first-party precision, the original Xbox, well, it was loud, online, and technically arrogant. I mean, its center of gravity was clear. Halo 2, Burnout 3, Ninja Gaiden, fast, competitive, combat forward. Western RPGs on consoles existed, but they weren't the headline act. And that's why Fable was so conspicuous. A storybook British action RPG about reputation, property ownership, and morale theater. It didn't quite match the platform's testosterone profile. Therefore, the promise carried some extra weight.
A living world wasn't just a pitch, it was a differentiator, a claim that this plastic box under your television could simulate life. I mean, the appetite was real, but the constraints, they were physical.
Behind the promise wasn't some corporate content factory. It was actually just a small team, big blue box, operating under the Lionhead banner. The idea was actually deceptively simple. Build a living world, a hero who ages, villagers who gossip, but simple ideas have this habit of morphing into something completely different. Early prototypes chased a systemic simulation, trees growing in real time, continents just beyond the horizon.
The ambition wasn't imaginary, it was just expensive. Development stretched, redesign stacks, scope shifted, deadlines didn't. An entire continent was removed late into production.
Systems were triaged. Features that worked in isolation proved unsustainable in aggregate. The most famous example was Poetic, the infamous acorn.
The promise that you could knock a seed off a branch and return later to find a forest, it consumed 15% of the processing budget. 15% on fixed hardware in 2004.
Therefore, the feature was killed. But the budget didn't disappear, it just went into combat feel, effects, stabilization, things that players would notice every minute instead of, once a season.
The dream didn't die, it just got condensed.
By the time Fable shipped, it wasn't this open-ended ecological simulation. It was a curated stage set designed to feel like one. When the gap between the rhetoric and the reality became impossible to ignore, its creator did something rare. He apologized. Not for the ambition, but for believing it would survive contact with production. Fable hit shelves in September of 2004. The reception wasn't just kind, it was enthusiastic. An 85 on Metacritic, critics lauded the rare console RPG that actually had personality, atmosphere, a life story that felt human compared to the menu-heavy PC ports of the day. Commercially, it moved over 375,000 copies in week one. It won awards for composition and character development. By any conventional metric, it was a massive win. But metrics aren't expectations. The main quest was aggressively short, the branching rigged, the living world felt more like a responsive theme park more than an ecosystem. The reviewers judged the game on what it was, the forums judged it on what was promised. Both were correct.
The consensus landed closer to reality, but the hype lived longer.
Therefore, Fable became something unusual, a critical darling, a commercial smash, and a permanent cautionary tale about the cost of selling a dream before you've built the foundation.
Anywhere you can see, you can go to. You just reach your hand up there and you can go in that thing.
Fable tells a simple story. You begin as a child in Oakvale, a birthday, a tragedy, fire, time skips. You're taken to the Heroes Guild, trained, tested, released into the world, but not as a farm boy, as a professional myth.
Childhood, training, adulthood, not this sprawling epic, but a life in chapters.
The conflict is revenge wrapped in destiny. The forces behind the opening catastrophe surface, masks come off, lineage matters, but the plot isn't the point, the tone is. This isn't high fantasy, it's British folklore filtered through pub humor. NPCs gossip, children mock you, shopkeepers react to your haircut, villagers cheer or flinch. The game doesn't just track you, it tracks how you're perceived. You aren't just building a character, you're building a legend through reputation, repetition, and presentation. The world talks back to you, sometimes gently, sometimes crudely. That theatrical loop, more than the revenge arc, more than the final boss, is what really gives the story its weight. It feels less like you're reading a novel and more like you're becoming a rumor. Mechanically, Fable is honest.
You take a quest, travel to a discrete region, fight, decide, collect, return stronger, repeat.
The world isn't this continuous wilderness, it's a network of connected spaces stitched together by loading screens. That structure matters. The encounters feel staged, the illusion of the living world sits on top of this rigid theatrical set. Combat lives in 3 lanes: melee, range, and will, the game's polite term for magic. The controls favor immediacy over simulation. The lock-on is functional, occasionally clumsy but readable. You feel capable early. That wasn't an accident.
Fable trims the friction of its contemporaries. Menus are light, stats are clear, progression isn't a spreadsheet, it's physical. Invest in physique, your body grows, act cruel, you get horns, act benevolent, and light bends around you.
Morality isn't this hidden variable, it's cosmetic, it's social, it's public. Villagers gossip, children assign nicknames, shopkeepers adjust their tone. This is the signature move, not morality as a branching narrative, morality as persistent theater. The friction arrives when expectations outrun structure. The opening hours imply constant divergence, but the mid-game reveals a heavily guided path. What did it feel like? Well, it felt like inhabiting a reactive stage. Moment to moment, you were playing a competent action RPG, but the texture, the gossip, the scars, the exaggerated halos, it created the sensation of being watched, not by a simulation engine, by the village. The difference was subtle, but it was everything. Fable succeeded because it understood visibility. Most RPGs hid their morale system in menus. Fable staged it. Your choices weren't invisible variables, they were scars, they were reputation, they were strangers flinching or applauding when you walk past. It made role-playing legible. It respected the controller. This wasn't a spreadsheet masquerading as a fantasy. Combat was readable, progression was immediate. It met the console player where they were, not where PC traditionally insists they should be.
And that accessibility mattered more than any missing content ever did.
And it had personality, that British folklore tone, the humor, villagers who insulted you with surprising creativity. Ambition may have been trimmed, but character was not. Where it faltered was clear. Expectation management. When you sell an ecological simulator but ship a theatrical set, players are going to feel misled. And when you promise them boundless divergence but deliver a guided path, they're going to measure what's absent. But here's the imbalance. The missing systems, they were conceptual. The personality, that was tangible. You can't replay cut content. You can, however, replay a world that reacts to you. I think the legacy of Fable is clear. It didn't just vanish, it grew. Fable 2 expanded the formula. Fable 3 streamlined and fixed the edges. Microsoft acquired Lionhead and treated the series not as an experiment, but a pillar of its platform's identity. That alone secured its place in history.
But the deeper legacy is structural. Fable normalized visible morality on a console, not as a hidden meter, as spectacle.
The industry eventually built deeper branching, larger maps, but the idea of role play that is readable, that your character's body, reputation, social feedback should function as a user interface, that's stuck.
It also became an early case in modern AAA tension, right? Sell the dream, ship the reality, and that gap between those two became industry folklore.
So did the apology. Yet, here's the inconvenient truth. 2 decades later, people aren't revisiting Fable to catalog what's missing. They're revisiting it for Oakville's sunlight, for villagers gossiping, for the signature sensation that your hero was becoming a story. Anniversary editions, retrospectives, a reboot on the horizon. The conversation never quite dies because the core idea it survived. The point isn't whether Fable delivered everything it promised. It obviously didn't. The point is actually a little bit quieter. It proved that players didn't just want bigger worlds, they wanted worlds that actually noticed they were there. I mean, Fable sold a dream it couldn't possibly sustain, but it also shipped a personality that was strong enough to outlive that disappointment. It wasn't perfect, but it was formative, and sometimes that's enough.